Coming up next here on Channel 17, New York Lawn and Garden.
New York Lawn and Garden is made possible through the generosity of the WXXI Associates.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to New York Lawn and Garden. I'm Jack Kelly. It's Saturday afternoon and it's time to take a short break from your gardening chores. We have an interesting show for you. Later we'll be traveling to Kendall, New York to check in with the Della Costa Landscape Project. But before we do that, we want to check in with you and help solve your gardening problems. So if you happen to have a question, give us a call at 1-800-HI-NILAG. And for our viewers in the Rochester area and in Canada, the number is area code 716-454-6922. And Canadian callers, please call collect. With me today to offer advice are Mike Tanzini of Ted Collins Tree and Landscape and Jim Wilmot of Cornell Cooperative Extension. Well, as we normally do, we like to begin with our letters, and we do happen to have a number of letters that we've accumulated over the past couple of weeks. And so, Mike, you'll take the first one.
Yes, the first one, Jack, today is about a fungus that's bothering a hawthorn tree. And I suspect that it's a English type of hawthorn. It's getting a little pepper leaf spot. You can see on the sample that we have here that the leaves are spotted with little brown spots. And what happened to the tree is a limb broke off last year in a rainstorm, but I don't think that's related at all to the problem. We are having a very heavy fungus year this year because of cool temperatures and wet moisture during the period. So we're having many fungus problems, and that's going to bother many kinds of trees, and we'll talk about a little more of those. So you're going to have to begin some treatments and also consider some fall fertilization to get the tree on the rebound. This hawthorn tree is very susceptible to a pepper leaf spot fungus, and that's probably what it has.
Okay. All right, Jim, you have a letter from a gentleman here in Rochester, Mr. Bush.
Yeah, Mr. August Bush sends us a sample of his white ash tree, and it's a sample that we're seeing a lot this year. And just as Mike had said, the fungal disease problems have been real bad, and not only on the ash tree but on sycamores and several of the different species of maple. We've been seeing a disease called anthracnose, and basically what the disease does is it causes the leaves to get these brown blotches that we see in there, usually along the veins, but it can vary from a small area to a whole leaf, and eventually those leaves will drop off the tree. He really doesn't have to worry a whole lot. Most established and mature white ash trees or people with sycamore trees, if they just water the tree and take good care of it during the summer, it will refoliate and it will fill out again and it'll look just right. Another problem he had, he didn't send us a sample, I guess it's already decomposed, was from his vegetable garden. He had zucchini and asparagus that he had problem. He said asparagus beans, although we're in a quandary about what an asparagus bean is. What I suspect may have happened to him is it may have put the plants out a little bit too early. And with that cool, wet weather that we've had, if it in fact is a bean or zucchini, it probably would have been subject to some of the fungi in the soil.
Okay. Yeah, here in the Rochester area, it did waver back and forth between hot and wet and cold.
It was real cool in the middle of May.
Right. Okay. Mike, we have time for one more letter.
Okay, I got another problem with a plant. It's called Agopodium, or bishop's weed. It's invaded a garden, and the folks would like to know how to get rid of it. And this is a very tenacious ground cover plant that once it's established in an area is very hard to control. It's desirable if you're looking for a tough and real durable ground cover, but if you're trying to garden around it, it may invade other areas. A couple of suggestions. One is to cut it and spray Roundup on the new sprouts. The other is to lay black plastic over the area or tar paper and make sure you shield out all the light. If a plant can't get up, produce leaves, and make food and store it, it's not going to survive. But you have to really hang in there with this one because it's a very tough ground cover or weed, depending on how you're looking at it.
Right. Okay. Jim, do you want to try to answer this last letter here with the person had a question as to
Yeah, we
particular plant?
Well, we had one here from Mrs. Ruth Wadsworth, and we had a little trouble. She sent the specimen in and claimed that it was a caterpillar. It was eating some of her violets, several of the other plants in the yard. We weren't able to find the actual insect, so it's kind of difficult to tell what it might be. But one thing is that one thing that will work if it is a caterpillar is the insecticide 7, but you want to be careful that you check the label and make sure the plants are on the label if you use that. Another one that works well is a biological insecticide called Bacillus thuringiensis, and you can find that in the store as BT or Dipel or Thuricide, and you can use that product. It's pretty safe, non-toxic, and really won't hurt the plants or any of the other things in the yard. So that would be my suggestion. It sounds like it's a pretty general feeder, though, feeding on all these different plants.
Okay. All right, Jim, thanks very much. If you happen to have a question that you'd like to answer, and perhaps you can't get through on the phone lines, and you really have that pressing question, a problem invading your yard, and would still like to write us a letter, we're going to take a moment right now and show you where you can send the letters.
Send us a sample of your problem with your name, address, and brief description of your gardening problem to New York Lawn and Garden, Post Office Box 21, Rochester, New York 14601. Or bring your sample to our studio at 280 State Street. Please have your sample wrapped in paper towels to protect its freshness. By the way, if you have a plant or garden that you're proud of, send us a color photograph or slide, and we'll be happy to put that on the air, too.
Okay, we are back, and now it's time to go to our phones, and our first caller, who I believe is from Waterloo. Hello, you're on the air.
Oh, yes. Hi, how are you today?
Okay, yourself?
I'm just fine, except I think I've met my Waterloo.
What's your problem?
Neighborhood cats digging in my garden, and of course using my garden beds also as sandboxes.
Mm-hmm.
I have tried moss balls and moss crystals around the garden, and it didn't help, and it also, I understand, can poison the ground. And I'm kind of at my wit's end because I have young children, and I don't want to subject them to anything poisonous that they might pick up and put in their mouths, or plants, you know how little ones are. They'll put things in their mouths very easily. And I'm kind of at my wit's end.
Well, I know we had a viewer who wrote just a short while ago about how she solved the cat problem, and maybe you guys can answer. She threw black pepper all over her yard, or over the garden area, so when the cat came in to sniff, it had a little pepper attack.
What a great idea.
I don't know if there's anything else you guys have, but that was a home remedy type situation.
Yeah,
Black pepper.
Black pepper, just take...
I'll give it a shot. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, we'll go to our next caller, who's from Derby. Hello?
Hello?
Hi, how are you today?
Okay.
What can we do for you?
Well, I have a couple of questions. Something is eating the top of my clematis vine, which is 5 feet off the ground.
Can you describe what the eating pattern looks like?
The leaf is totally gone.
So consuming the whole leaf.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any caterpillars? Can you find any insects, particularly on the undersides of the leaves that are still there?
No, I haven't seen anything. And this
Interesting
is the
problem.
first time it's ever happened.
Sounds like maybe a horse is coming by and munching on it.
Right.
Yeah,
Way up
there's
there.
really nothing, that you can recommend unless you know what the pest is. So we'd have to know what it was before we could tell you.
They usually don't have too much trouble. That vine
No.
is pretty carefree, easy to grow,
Yeah.
and doesn't have a lot of pest problems.
Possibly a solution would be to take off a part of it and take it to your local garden store and have them take a look at it. It is difficult for us to try to analyze what the problem is without sort of either seeing a sample of it or the pest itself. How about question number 2?
Well, Creeping Charlie.
Creeping Charlie?
Does it propagate any way besides crawling along the ground?
That's another mysterious plant. That name gets tagged onto many different kinds of lawn weeds and garden weeds, and
It's just a little purple flower.
yeah, well, there's many plants that could fill that description. Many of those creeping type plants do root at the nodes where they touch down, and they can also be scattered by mowers and re-root. Most of them creep out of garden beds or along the edges and are a problem. If they're broadleaf weeds, many of them can be controlled with the typical broadleaf weed control materials you'll find at the garden center. Some might be special weeds and need their own specific treatment. So you might have to get a closer identification on that at the local garden store. Dig a plug with the roots in soil, keep it moist, and take it in alive and living, and they might be able to help you at the garden store.
Okay.
Well, how long after you put a weed killer down, then can you plant grass in a spot?
Well, 4 to 6 weeks is a good waiting period before you can scratch the soil and reseed. And at this time of year, reseeding is not necessarily recommended. You might want to do your weed killing now and reseeding around Labor Day.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Good luck.
Okay. We'll go to our next caller, who's from Rochester. Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, I'd like to transplant a mature clematis vine, and I wondered how successful I might be and how should I do it? Should I cut it way back, or shouldn't I even try to transplant one?
I think he'd probably be successful with it, but for most of the woody plants, and it's a woody vine, so it wouldn't be a real good idea to do that now in the summertime. I think you'd have much more success if you did it in the fall or preferably in the spring. And what you should do is cut it back and make sure you get as much of a root ball as you can. If it's an old established clematis vine, you're probably going to have a pretty decent size spread of the root system. So you want to dig as much as you can handle and then move that. I think if you get probably a root ball of about 1 foot to 1.5 feet and prepare a nice area for it and do it in the springtime, I think you'll have real good success with it.
Okay, well, I hope that answers your question. We'll go to our next caller, who's also from Rochester. Hello, you're on the air.
Yeah, I have a problem with lilac bushes. I planted 2 new ones about almost 3 years ago, and they haven't flowered at all. And the 2 old bushes that I have flower very sparsely. I was wondering if there was any kind of fertilizer I could use to get them to flower more.
Well, I think you want to check a couple other things as well. On the older shrubs, check the bottom of the stalks and look for holes that might be caused by lilac borers. Also, on older plants, you do need to get the oldest wood out occasionally and stimulate the growth of new, younger sprouts, which will bring more vigor to the plant. In addition to that, general fertilization and plenty of water with mulch would be a wise thing to do. On the young plants, important to check your planting depth, make sure they're not too deep or not too high, and be sure they get mulch and water. And it's not uncommon that the plant takes a few years to get going and build up some mature wood in order to make some flower buds. So be patient with the young ones, but just keep the good cultural practices up.
Okay, we hope that helps you out. And our next caller we'll go to is from Pittsford. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Fine. We have a 12-foot hairy lauder bush, which the last 2 years it's getting fewer and fewer leaves each year. And there are no signs of borers or pests of any kind. We have no idea why it looks like it's dying.
Well, I think what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to have that specimen looked at closer by somebody who knows about woody plant material. We did have specimens last year that came into our diagnostic clinic that had problems with canker on the stem. And if you take a real close look at the woody part of the plant, a canker would be a discolored area or perhaps an area of the bark where you would see it roughened or maybe even peeling away. That's a possibility, and if you do have that, what we would suggest is to prune those areas out or to prune out the areas that you see dying back and not performing real well. And make sure you prune it during dry weather and take sterilize your pruning shears between the cuts. If you use 1 part Clorox to 9 parts water, that will sterilize the shears so that you don't reinfect when you cut another area of the bush. Besides that, be sure that you water the plant well through the summertime. Make sure it doesn't dry out, and you may want to consider a light fertilization if you want to do it now, or wait until after the leaves fall off and fertilize a little more heavily.
Okay, good advice. We mentioned at the top of the program that we were going to take a trip out to Kendall, New York, and we're going to take a moment right now and do that, and when we come back, we're going to take a call from Syracuse. So we're going to go off to Kendall, New York right now.
Hi, Richard. Came out to see how you're doing with the garden.
Thanks very much. Yeah. Well, we're moving along. I got a little bit of a late start because I was still in my house when I should have been out here planning. However, I made a few changes in the plan you gave me. Originally, I think you called for rows primarily, and the major change I made was to construct small beds, which is mostly for aesthetic reasons, not really for any particular agricultural reason.
Well, they look good. They'll be very easy to work around because you'll be able to travel around the outside and reach into the middle of the beds, and I think also the outlines look real nice. I see we've got some stones placed just to give us a picture.
Yeah, I haven't gotten the big stones you called for in yet, but at least this gives us a sense of what the design of the garden would be.
Okay.
I had one question about my corn plan, and I did follow your recommendation in starting the large, tall plants on the north side of the garden and moving to the smaller plants on the south side. I started planting 2 rows and then 10 days later planted 2 more rows, and I'd like to continue with that to have a nice spread over the summer of getting corn. I just need to know how long I can plant before it gets a little bit too late to harvest.
I think you could go to about the middle of July, continuing planting to about the middle of July, and that would be about your last crop, and that should be ripe in September. And hopefully you can have it before frost comes.
Great. Why don't we go over on this side? I have other questions here. I planted some Roman beans here, the flat string beans, in this bed. And again, I waited 10 days and planted some more there because it is a favorite of the family. I noticed that the other string beans that I planted in other parts of the garden didn't seem to come up as well, and I can't really say that's germination because we got good germination on all the other seeds. Those are the regular yellow snap beans, and for some reason we did not get good germination on those. However, generally I think it's doing well. I've got cauliflower and broccoli here. I planted them in 2 different areas to give myself a chance against the insects because I know they do get attacked a little bit more.
Yeah, they do have a heavy insect problem.
I know that at some point I'm going to start getting worms. What could I do? I'd like to stay with organic gardening if I can. I've used compost underneath all my transplants here, and I'd like to stay away from chemicals as much as possible.
Okay, well, one approach for those types of worms that's a natural insecticide is the BT, or Bacillus thuringiensis, which you can apply to the plants, and it will take care of the caterpillars, which are actually the caterpillars of a moth.
Okay.
So that would be the insecticide that you could use here that might give you some relief from chemical pesticides.
And eggplant, I wanted to show you those.
Okay.
I've already noticed on these, and I did do some planting with some hot peppers to try and at least eliminate some insect problems, but I've already noticed some real tiny black insects on the eggplant, and I'm noticing some eggs there too. I have no idea what they are, and I'd like to deal with them now. I don't see too many today because last night I came out and brushed them off, but I know I'll have them again.
I'm not sure what they might be, and that might require a little reading or some contact with Cooperative Extension to find out what specific insects bother eggplant. At home, I have real good luck with them. I haven't had a lot of insect problems, but I'm in the city. Out here in the country, there just might be more pests that you have to deal with. So that's one that you might have to do a little further research on. And as far as the approach to treating them, whether it's a spray, a dusting, or some type of treatment, may have to happen early on before they're actually even bearing fruit to get enough leaves developed. And maybe a short-lived insecticide might be appropriate before there's fruit development, if you have to do that to get them through this early stage.
I wanted to know also, I've noticed in watching the movement of the sun that around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, most of the garden is in shadow because of the tall trees on this side. Is that going to be a problem for me later on, especially in harvest time?
No, I think you'll be all right because you're getting all morning and all the way into late afternoon. Most of these crops will tolerate that amount of sunshine. As the trees grow taller, you might have to advance the garden slightly forward to get away from the shadows. Also, the roots of the trees could be a problem, so you'll just have to monitor that. Some crops will tolerate some shade or some partial shade, and others need full sun. And so the full sun plants will really need to be towards the front of the garden and the south side, south corner.
Okay.
So that's something you'll have to monitor over the years.
The soil samples came out pretty nicely. This land hasn't been used in about 40 years. It's been pastured. So the balance between the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium was good. It is a little bit acid, though, and I applied some lime on the soil to try to bring that down. However, I'm not real sure which plants will tolerate that better. Do I need to have a more alkaline soil for things like eggplants and cauliflower and broccoli, or am I okay with the with it the way it is. I mean, I think it's still a little bit acid, and I have to do another test to really determine that.
Slightly acid is good for most vegetable crops and plants like that and flowers. There are very few plants that really like alkaline soil, so neutral to slightly acid is usually a good soil approach. So I would stick with, I think you probably got the right thing, but it is wise to check in again at this time and see how you're doing with that pH adjustment to make sure that you haven't gone too far in one direction.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
All right, you want to show me some of the things up front?
All right, Michael. One thing when you were out there, Richard had brought up with the heat, especially out there. What can he do to I guess take care of the garden and overcome some of the heat that'll happen during the course of the summer?
Jack, now's the time to think about mulching, and there's a lot of different ways to approach that. But mulch conserves water, keeps the soil temperature more stable, and helps to eliminate weed problems. Some tips on mulching. Some things you have right around the house you can use. Newspaper, black and white only, 6 sheets thick, will do a good job of keeping weeds out and keeping moisture in. But you usually need to cover that with something else like grass clippings, wood chips, bark mulch, or some other type of compost material or organic material to cover it and hold it in place. So just think about mulching this time of year, because soon we're going to start facing real heat and dry temperatures.
Okay. 6 sheets, not 5.
6 sheets.
6 sheets.
5, the weeds will come through.
This is scientific, we know. All right, we're going to go back to our phone calls right now, and our next caller is from Syracuse. Hello, you're on the air. Hello, Syracuse, are you there? Hi, how are you?
Fine.
Good, what can we do for you today?
Well, I have a lovely hedge of pink roses, and they're in bloom beautifully. The only problem is each year only about 2 to 3 stalks, if you will, produce all of the flowers. And as a result, the hedge looks a bit less than full. And I have hesitated. The flowers, of course, come off the top of these taller stalks. And I have hesitated to cut that part of it off because I hate to lose the flowers. And I was wondering how you would get the roses to be bushier.
Okay, he wants to bush out.
Do you know what kind of rose it is? You say a hedge rose. Do you know if it's a tea rose, a climbing rose?
It's, I guess, a form of tea rose. It is sold as a hedge. Has very little odor to it. The roses do. Very little aroma. I'm trying to think of the name of them, but it's been about 3 years since I bought the last of them, and my memory isn't that good, I'm afraid.
Some roses bloom on the wood that develops in the current season, and that's usually the case with a tea rose. Other roses, like a climbing rose, will bloom on last year's wood. So if you prune off last year's wood, then you won't have any blooms. But with a tea rose, you can prune them right down to the ground. The pruning practices would greatly affect the way the thing would grow, and also the blooming potential of the plant. You may want to try, if it does bloom, look at it and see if it's blooming on the current season's wood. That would be the wood that's growing this year. And if it is, try different pruning practices. Maybe prune it a little bit closer to the ground in the late winter, early spring of next year. And also check your soil fertility. You could have a complete nutrient analysis done by Cooperative Extension to see what that is, because that can also affect the bloom. So those are a couple ideas I had. Might you?
Well, I would agree that it's probably related to pruning. If you just simply want thicker plants, you're going to have to maybe sacrifice flowers for a year, do some heavy pruning, and then let the plants grow without pruning, and that may demonstrate, like Jim says, older wood blooming or new wood blooming for you, so you understand the cycle of the plant.
Okay, we hope that helps you out. And we're going to go to our next caller, who's from Irondequoit. Hello, you're on the air.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hi.
2 questions, please. One is, I have made a very concentrated concoction here with lots of Tabasco, red pepper, which I boiled in water, rubbing alcohol, joy, and cigarette butts, which I steeped a long time in just a little bit of water, strained it all. I guess it's kind of concentrated. My question is, should I dilute it? And what I'm using it for is, I have dozens and dozens of hosta, which rabbits or other animals are using for their private lettuce bed. I'd like to try this, but I don't know if I should put it on full strength or half diluted, or what do you suggest?
I think it's an experimental time, and keeping records might be the thing to do. Start with, on one plant, maybe full strength, and cut it by 50%, then cut it again, and keep reducing the concentrate and increasing the amount of water you use, and see how effective you are. You might get a plant to wilt with the first application, but you're going to, because you're developing your own material, you're going to have to do some experiments, some research.
Sounds like
And the second question is, just quickly let me tell you, some years ago when everybody was talking about the gypsy moth, I had a garage sale, put up a cardboard sign on a tree. When I took the sign down, the whole back of the cardboard was covered. There was no cardboard left that you could see. It was just covered with the caterpillars. Now, I tell you that because yesterday I was vacuuming around the foundation of my house, and I found in maybe an 8-foot by 3-foot area of the foundation about a dozen of these things. I'm wondering, are they coming back? And also, they were on the side of the house which faces 2 huge maple trees. Do I have anything to worry about?
Gypsy moth is an insect that it has one generation a year. That means that right now you're seeing caterpillars. They will change into a pupa, and that's the resting stage, and then they will turn into the moth. The moth will lay eggs on the trees, the branches that you have, and on anything else that you might have around, your grill, your outdoor furniture, just about anything. Next spring, in about mid-May, those eggs will hatch, and out will come the caterpillars again. So what you might want to try doing is wait until after that period when they're laying their eggs and go around and gather up those egg masses. They're about 1.5 inches long and about 3/4 of an inch wide. And the color, it looks like a chamois cloth. And then just take those and then put them in gasoline or in some other solution that would kill them. And I think that will help you. We have information at Cooperative Extension on the gypsy moth. If you'd like to write in or stop by our office, you could pick that up. It would help you with them.
Okay, and why don't you just quickly give the address so that they know where to go?
It's 249 Highland Avenue, and that's Rochester 14620. And that's our local office. Of course, we're talking throughout the state, so
Right.
each county would have their own office.
Which you usually find in the phone book under the county offices.
Right.
Okay. All right, we'll go to our next caller who's from Rush. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello, this is Marjorie Bullock from Rush, and my problem is that we have 2 beautiful, had been Alberta spruce that are twins and act as the gateway to the garden. And they're now 18 years old or so and about 8 feet tall. And just this spring, the needles started to brown, and not all the way around yet, but down a swath from the top to the bottom. And one is a lot worse than the other, but the other one is beginning to do this too. And we wondered if there's any what spray or what we could do to save them.
Quick answer.
Okay, you have spider mites on there, and what you're going to have to do is get a treatment on there with something that's labeled for mites. You're going to have to repeat 2 or 3 or 4 times till you get them under control. They usually bounce back, though. Water and fertilize.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and we're going to wrap this up real fast, but I just want to make one reminder before we go. Next week, the Friends of WXXI are inviting you to come to the Patrick Berry House at 692 Mount Hope Avenue for a tour, garden tour. There's the information right there. You can call Friends right here at the station, and that number is 325-7500. If you want to go to the Patrick Berry House and see the thing, and also, we're going to be there. So why don't you join us? And that's all for this week's program, and we'll hope to see you next week on New York Lawn and Garden.